Hello, I'm Greg. Welcome to my channel, Midnight Oil Software, and the first episode of the Highland Panic Dev Log. Today I'm going to dive into the exciting world of my real-time, cross-platform multiplayer card game, Highland Panic. But before we get too far in, let me give you a quick overview of the game. So Highland Panic takes inspiration from the fast-paced card game that my family and I love, Dutch Blitz, but with a Scottish twist instead of a Pennsylvania Dutch one. Instead of Dutch piles, I've got panic piles. Instead of post piles, I got trading piles. Instead of wood piles, I've got castle piles. And instead of a blitz pile, I've got panic piles. Just like Dutch Blitz, Highland Panic has 4 suits. But instead of a pail, pump, plow, and carriage, we've got claymore, kilt, bagpipes, and clan symbol. And instead of Dutch boys and girls, you'll find Highland lads and lasses gracing the cards. The game has the mechanics of solitaire, but all players play to common clan piles. These are the equivalent of the foundation piles in solitaire. Players race to be the first to play all 10 cards from their panic pile, earning points by playing cards to the common clan piles. You lose points for any cards still in your panic pile at the end of the round. One of the biggest hurdles that prevented me from tackling this project for many years was implementing multiplayer functionality. I had played around with Mirror and had even worked up a lobby system, but I really didn't feel like it was suitable for what I wanted to do. I was going to have to host my own server. There was no concept of lobby or relay with Unity back then. But thanks to Unity's new release of their Unity gaming services, including their netcode for GameObjects, lobby, and relay, that's no longer an issue. The other hurdle that I faced in rebranding this game was the task of creating custom artwork. Luckily, with the advent of AI art, like Midjourney, I've been able to bring my Highland Panic universe to life with stunning visuals. In this series, I'll be taking a look at the journey I've been on so far, from the initial concept to the implementation of multiplayer, and how I used AI art in the game. I even used ChatGPT to generate the description of my game for my Steam page, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. So let me give you a real quick overview of the tools that I'm using for this game. I'm using Hack and Plan for my planning. Basically, it's kind of like a Kanban or sprint board, if you're familiar with that. Essentially, whenever I think of an item I want to add to the game, a feature, or if there's a bug that I discover, or some task I know I need to do, I just really quickly come in here and create, a task or a user story or a bug. And that way I know it's not going to fall through the cracks. I can come review this and see what I want to work on. When I start working on something, I just drag it into in progress. Once I've made a change and committed it in, I move it into testing. And once I think everything is thoroughly tested, I'll move it over here to complete it. I'm using GitLab for my source control, and GitLab actually integrates with Hack and Plan. So when I do a commit to GitLab, in the commit description, I can put a tag for the work item that commit is related to. For instance, I have this bug here. I had an issue if I tried to drag immediately after double clicking, and that's item number 83. And so if I open that up, you can see in my commit comment, I put HNP-83. So that's Hack and Plan-83. And that linked it to this work item. And the effect is, if I click on that, it takes me to GitLab and to the very commit that included the changes for that bug fix. So it's just a really nice way to keep my work items here synchronized with the code that's related to those work items. And finally, I'm using Unity Cloud Build to build my application and push it up to the Apple App Store for my test flight users to be able to grab and test. And I have a whole video about how to do that. If you're interested, I'll put a link in the description. I want to talk a little bit about how I organize my project. If you've watched any of my tutorials, you know I almost always use this standard organization structure here where I've got a folder for every type of object. So I got my animations, my art, audio, fonts, input, prefab, scenes, scripts, and then I'll break them out if there's some subsets within them. I'm taking a different approach for Highland Panic. Basically, in Highland Panic, I'm grouping things by where they are in the game. So anything that's common to all parts of the game is going to go under this common folder. And inside there, I've got art, audio, fonts, materials, models, prefab, scripts, and so forth. And I do the same thing for the game over screen, anything that's specific to gameplay. So when you're actually playing the game, the lobby, the title screen, and I have a separate folder here for the tutorial. I even had the scenes in these subfolders. So here's my tutorial scene, here's my game scene, there's my game over scene, and so forth. I wanted to talk a little bit about the assets that I'm using in the project. So here in Package Manager, you can see I'm using Lobby and Relay Netcode for GameObjects. I use JetBrains Rider for my editor. I'm also using TextMesh Pro, of course. But I wanted to point out over here, if you look in my project structure, under Asset Packs and Plugins, I'm using this GUI Pro Kit. This has got some really good assets for UI and sprites and things. I like to use that. Asset Inventory is just for me to search all the assets that I've downloaded and find any I want to pull in. It's not really part of the game. It's just a tool for during development. This is my package for my object pool manager that I have up on the asset store for free. And down here under plugins, I'm using Maintainer. This is a tool that will strip any unused assets from your project before you build and deploy it. I'm using DoTween for animation. I have Quantum Console here. So I have a little icon in the game that will allow me to toggle the Quantum Console on. So in a release build, I'll be able to see any log messages. This helps me diagnose issues in the game when I'm testing a release build. I'm using Odin Inspector and Validator. And I think that's pretty much it as far as assets go. I'd like to talk a little bit about the art that I'm using in the game. So I'm going to come over here to my title screen art folder and select the Highland landscape. And I'm going to take this guy and convert to a floating window so we can see that nice and big. So you can see there is the landscape image that I use for the background in most of the screens in the game. I did pull this into Photoshop and add some vignetting, and I tinted this a little darker green to make the logo text pop out more on the title image, as you can see here. But these images were all generated using Midjourney, which is an AI art program, which, as I mentioned in the intro, is what helped me overcome the initial hurdle of how am I going to get nice looking art for this game that has a Highland Scottish theme. And as you can see, there it is. I got this Dutch girl, not Dutch, Highland girl and Highland boy, and I got this nice little weird looking Celtic frenzied looking logo here. I generated sprite sheets for my bot player portraits. I'm in the process of adding the ability to add bot players, so if no one else is online, you can still play the game. And I have lots of in-game art too, so each card has an attractive card back. So there's 4 suits in the game. There's bagpipes, clan symbol, claymore, and kilt. And the suits have no impact on the actual play of the game. It's just a way to distinguish your cards from your opponent's cards. It really doesn't serve any purpose in the game other than artistic purposes. I also have for the fronts of the cards a frame that's either a lad or a lass. So in Highland Panic, when you're playing on your trading piles, the cards have to alternate boy, girl, boy, girl. So I needed to have a way to distinguish at a glance whether this is a girl card or a boy card. Now I'm going to revisit these images because I've gotten quite a bit of feedback that the aliasing on these borders here is not very attractive. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this gold border altogether and just sort of blend the portrait into the background. And I'll probably simplify this border as well. Now, the way I display the cards in the game, I'm going to go ahead and dock this guy back to the inspector. And I'm going to come over here into my game canvas. I'm in the game scene. And in the game canvas, you expand it out. You've got a viewport. And the whole game is UI based. All right, so everything is in a UI canvas. And there's your clans panel here, which is where all the players play common drop cards, just like the foundation piles in Solitaire. But then there are up to 4 player panels, depending on how many players there are in the game. And inside each player panel, you've got a space for the player's portrait and name and how many points they have. So that's, again, all UI. And then you've got your draw pile. Let me just zoom out here a little bit. You've got your draw pile here. You've got what I'm calling the castle pile here. And then that would be the wood pile in Dutch Blitz. And then you've got your panic pile, which would be the blitz pile in Dutch Blitz. And then finally, up to 5 trading piles, depending on how many players there are in the game. So if there's a 2-player game, you're going to have all 5 trading piles. If there's 3 or 4 players, you're going to only have 3 trading piles. And these are all within a horizontal layout group so that they're all evenly spaced here in the center of that section. Now, inside each pile, I'm going to turn off this debug info here for that pile. The debug info basically is a way for me to tell how many cards are in the pile. And I have a hotkey that will turn debug information on and off. And it's just for during testing, I want to be able to track how many cards are in each pile. But underneath of that, you've got your frame for that pile, and then an optional shine, which I can turn on or off. And basically that's going to let me know if that's a legal drop position to drop a card on. Inside there, I have a cards container. Now the cards container is just where I can drop cards when a player plays them there. So for instance, I'm going to go into my prefabs folder. I'm going to take my card UI, and I'm just going to drag one in there. And now you can see that I've got a card played on top of that pile. And in this case, it's showing up as a green card that's a girl with a value of 1. And so let's expand our card and look at that. You can see that I've got a particle trail for when I'm animating the card from one position to another. There's a card back. So let me turn off the card front, and you can see the card back. This one, in this case, is just the sprite for the card back. But getting to the card front, I'm going to go and turn that card back off and turn the card front back on. So I've got my background, and that's going to be just what color it is, right? So if I toggle that on and off, right, it just is transparent. And I have a solid sprite that I just set the color, whether it's a green card, red card, blue card, or yellow card. And then the front frame, as I've already mentioned, that's basically our lad or lass. But underneath of that are 2 Text Mesh Pro fields for the number, whether it's a 1 or a 2 or 3 or a 4. And so the card UI script that's attached to that simply tells it what gender it is, what color it is, and then the value of the card. And this allows me to have one prefab that I can use to display any card, whether it's a lad or lass, green, blue, red, yellow, and in 1 through 10. I want to talk a little bit about audio. Obviously, any good game needs to have music and sound effects. And so as you can see here under my title screen, I've got my background music for the title screen. Different sound effects, gameplay music and sound effects. I have some music that I shuffle through. So as you can see, it's just a lot of sound effects like you would expect in a game. But what I really want to point out regarding sound effects is based on Jason Story's recommendation, I am using Eagle to organize all of my music and sound effects. You can see I've got over 13,000 different types of assets in here, mostly music and sound effects, but also some graphics. And just hovering over these, we'll let you sample them. And I can come up here and I can search, if I wanted to do something like click, I get a bunch of different click sounds. It's just a great way to quickly find a sound that you want to use in your game. And most of the assets in this game are actually paid assets. I've either gotten them through Humble Bundle deals or on the Unity Asset Store or some other offering. I wanted to show you a little trick that I'm employing that I learned from Tarot Dev in one of his videos. In my resources folder, I had this manager's prefab, and it's got a whole bunch of things underneath of it And in my managers folder under my Midnight Oil Software asset pack folder, I have this load persistent objects, and it has this runtime initialize on load method before scene load. This will get executed when the game first starts. It will go and find that manager's prefab and it will instantiate it. And then it will call don't destroy on load on it. So basically that ensures that all of those child objects underneath the managers are instantiated when the game first starts. And because this has don't destroy on load, these guys will never get disposed even when I change scenes. So that's just a neat little trick that I learned from TerraDev that makes sure the things that I want to have exist at the beginning of the game and always be available are there. So I've got my audio manager, my preferences manager, my music manager, and so forth. So while we're in here, I want to talk about my character portraits provider. This is a singleton instance, and it's got two asset reference serialized fields here for the character portraits and the bot portraits. And so if we open them, you can see I've got all my character portraits. So we got our bot portraits here. And if we go and look at the code for that character portraits provider, you can see that these serialized fields are asset references. So those are both addressables. And I'm not going to load them into memory until I call this load character portraits and load bot portraits. This allows me to get off the loading screen faster and into the title screen because it's not waiting for all these graphics to be loaded when the program first starts up. Before I wrap up, I want to remind you to subscribe to my channel, Midnight Oil Software, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss any future episodes of the Highland Panic Dev Log. And be sure to go over to Steam and wishlist this game. I'll put a link in the description. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. Be sure to stay tuned for more exciting updates and insights in the development of Highland Panic, and good luck on your game development journey.